On Easter Sunday in 2015, the clouds over Wiltshire, England, parted just enough to allow a small plane carrying 12 skydivers to ascend into the sky. For Victoria Cilliers, the jump was nothing new. An experienced professional instructor, Vicky had completed thousands of jumps. Each time she landed safely and returned home to her family. But this jump was unlike any before it, and this Easter, she would not return home. Victoria's case is truly unique. There was a catastrophic lack of evidence against the prime suspect. The crime theory seemed far-fetched. The suspect led a double life. The victim refused to seek justice, and the testimony was so illogical that understanding what had happened proved an overwhelming challenge for the jury, who were reportedly overwhelmed by stress. Victoria was born in Edinburgh, Scotland. She attended the University of Glasgow and, after qualifying as a physiotherapist, joined the British Army. By 2015, she had already risen to the rank of captain. Thanks to her career, she met Sergeant Emil Cilliers in 2010. Emil had suffered a skiing injury, and Vicky helped him recover. Emil grew up in a small town near Johannesburg, South Africa. He moved to the United Kingdom several years earlier and also served in the Royal Army's Physical Training Corps. The attraction between Vicky and Emil was instant. Both were athletic, active, and adrenaline enthusiasts. They married in 2011 in a magical ceremony in Cape Town, and then settled in Wiltshire, in a home Vicky had purchased using her family inheritance. The couple went on to have 2 children, April, followed by Ben 3 years later. Vicky was a frequent visitor to the Wiltshire Parachute Center, a base for the Army Parachute Association. She had completed her first jump at 16 and immediately fell in love with the sport. Now, at 39, she was a professional skydiving instructor. By the spring of 2015, she had performed over 2,600 jumps. Of course, during her pregnancies, Vicky couldn't indulge in her passion, but now, with her youngest child just 5 weeks old, she was eager to get back in the game, so to speak. Her excitement was unmatched when one day her husband came home with a broad smile and announced he had booked them a tandem skydive. It was a chance to break free from the monotony of daily life, and Vicky was overjoyed with anticipation. However, on Easter Sunday, the day of the scheduled jump, Vicky felt unusually anxious. The circumstances leading up to the jump did little to ease her nerves. Initially, she and Emil were supposed to skydive on Saturday, April 4th. But first, Emil couldn't find a babysitter for their children, leaving Vicky to jump alone. Then, severe weather caused the jump to be postponed until the following day. On April 5th, the wind had calmed, and the skies were less overcast. Even so, the divers had to wait in the hangar until 4 p.m. before getting the green light to jump. By then, Vicky was genuinely fatigued and just wanted to return home to her children. Still, this was Emil's gift, and he wanted her to enjoy herself. Vicky didn't want to disappoint him. She dismissed her unease, attributing it to nerves over her first jump after a long break. Besides, she was exceptionally well trained. If anything went wrong, she would be the one to fix it. She was taught to handle various skydiving mishaps. Vicky had even chased down less experienced divers during freefall, taken control, and helped them land safely. Since the weather was still less than ideal, the plan was for the plane to ascend no higher than 1,500 meters. It would be a simple and quick jump. Vicky was the last to leap from the aircraft and immediately felt elated. Everything seemed perfect. This was the adrenaline rush she had missed so much. But when her parachute deployed, she knew right away something was wrong. The lines were tangled. While this wasn't unprecedented, Vicky tried to untangle them. When her efforts failed, she didn't waste time and cut away the main chute to deploy the reserve. The reserve chute, however, didn't fully open. Only a small part of the parachute held her in the air, rendering it practically useless. Vicky began to spin wildly as she plummeted toward the ground. But thoughts of death didn't cross her mind. Her 2 children needed their mother. Desperately, she twisted her body to try and minimize the impact. After 1 or 2 minutes of frantic panic, the deafening rush of wind, and a rapid descent, her vision darkened. Vicky hit the ground. It was unbelievable. Both of Victoria Cilliers' parachutes had failed, and she fell without either one functioning. The staff at the parachute center didn't expect to find Vicky alive and even brought a body bag. But to their amazement, when they found her lying in a field, she was breathing and had regained consciousness. Initially, Vicky didn't even understand why everyone was fussing over her. By a stroke of luck, one of the skydivers was a doctor. He provided first aid and ensured her spine was not injured. Vicky was airlifted to the hospital. She suffered a fractured pelvis, several broken ribs on one side, and a damaged lung. But she survived. Her miraculous survival was attributed to a combination of factors. First, her light body weight. Second, her rapid spinning in the air, which softened the fall. Most importantly, she was incredibly fortunate to land on a freshly plowed field. While it was far from a soft landing, she lost consciousness on impact. The soft soil saved her life. Many associate skydiving with inherent danger. It's undoubtedly an adrenaline-fueled hobby, but accidents involving failures in both the main and reserve parachutes are extraordinarily rare, literally 1 in a million. Even the use of a reserve parachute is infrequent, occurring only once in 750 jumps. Given this, the chief instructor at the Army Parachute Association grew suspicious upon hearing about Vicky's failed jump. He immediately began inspecting her equipment. The instructor confirmed that the lines of the main parachute were tangled, which was why Vicky had cut it away. However, the reserve parachute was missing 2 critical components of its harness. As a result, it had partially deployed, but couldn't support Vicky in the air as it should have. He carefully examined the attachment points where the missing components should have been and found no signs of mechanical failure. Yet he knew that the reserve parachute had never been deployed before and had been inspected 16 times by 10 different experienced staff members at the center. Each inspection confirmed the components were in place. Their sudden and unexplained disappearance could only mean one thing: they had been deliberately removed. The chief instructor called the police, but he wasn't the first. A close friend of Vicky's, shaken by the circumstances of her fall, had already contacted the police, voicing her suspicions about Vicky's husband, Emil. She described their relationship as toxic, armed with the parachute as physical evidence of tampering and the testimony of Vicky's friend pointing to a potential suspect. Wiltshire police launched an official investigation. Meanwhile, Vicky spent several weeks in the hospital before returning home. Though she still wore a supportive brace, she was no longer bedridden. Her husband, Emil, helped her during recovery, and Vicky believed that his support was key to her swift progress. On Tuesday, April 28th, Emil left for work as usual, but he didn't return. He was arrested on suspicion of attempting to murder his wife. He offered no resistance during the arrest, made no claims of innocence, but did express outrage that he was taken into custody in front of his colleagues and subordinates. At the station, Emil played it smart. Fully aware that police would uncover incriminating evidence on his confiscated phone, he preemptively addressed the topics he knew they'd raise. His hope was that the detectives would believe his explanations, and he'd never have to deal with them again. Emil admitted he had been planning to leave Vicky for some time, claiming that she didn't measure up to his expectations in the bedroom. They only had intimacy twice a week. He revealed an affair with Austrian skydiving instructor Stephanie Goller, whom he'd met on Tinder during a skiing trip abroad. Though they had been seeing each other for only 5 months, Emil was already envisioning a future with her. But the revelations didn't stop there. Emil openly suggested a possible motive for killing his wife. He was deeply in debt to payday loan companies. As if that weren't enough to cast suspicion on him, Emil also let slip that on the Saturday before Vicky's planned jump, he had taken her parachute into a restroom. He claimed he did this because their daughter needed the bathroom, and he didn't want to leave the parachute unattended. Since Emil was in custody, he couldn't return home after work. Instead, detectives came to see Vicky and informed her of her husband's arrest. To Vicky, their accusations sounded absurd. She admitted she suspected Emil was having an affair and was aware of his financial irresponsibility. However, despite Emil's flaws, Vicky assured investigators that their marriage was unremarkable, and she didn't believe he harbored any ill will toward her. But was this truly the case? Their relationship had started like a fairy tale. Emil had been gentle and attentive, willing to do anything for Vicky. When their relationship became more serious, it was time for Vicky to meet Emil's children from his first marriage. But first, his ex-wife, Carly, wanted to meet Vicky. The two met at a cafe and had a pleasant conversation, until Carly asked a question that left Vicky utterly shocked. "You do know about the other children, don't you?" "What other children?" Vicky asked, stunned. It turned out that Emil had 4 children, but he had only told Vicky about 2 of them. Furious, embarrassed, and humiliated, Vicky returned home and confronted Emil. He explained that he hadn't mentioned the other children because their mother had kept them away from him. But Emil had lied. Emil Cilliers never knew rejection. His father owned a contracting company, and the boy was given everything he wanted. When Emil grew up, he got a job at his father's company. At 17, Emil decided he wanted a relationship. His eye fell on 13-year-old Nicolina. At 16, the girl gave birth to their first child. She had a cesarean section. As the girl later revealed, Just 10 days after the birth of their daughter, Emil demanded intimacy with her. He either didn't understand or didn't care that it could be dangerous. It's no surprise that 6 months later, she was already pregnant with their son. At that point, Emil decided to go to the UK for a short while to earn some money for his children. However, instead, he joined the country's military and started dating Carly. His mother had to break the news to Nicolina, who had no idea until that conversation that she had been betrayed. The relationship with Carly progressed quickly, and soon they were married and parents to 2 wonderful children. Meanwhile, Nicolina also moved to the UK with her children. In fact, she wanted Emil to be involved in their lives and reached out to him. The man casually told the girl that he had married Carly only for the visa. Nicolina believed him and forgave him. After that, the man managed to live with 2 families for a long time, and neither woman suspected anything until the truth came out. Carly told Vicky everything and warned her that Emil would treat her the same way. However, Vicky fell for the man's charm and couldn't break up with him at that time, especially since she found out she was pregnant. She and Emil were over the moon with happiness, but a month or 2 later, she had a miscarriage. Vicky was deeply upset and felt unwell, but their day was already fully planned. They were supposed to go to London, where Emil had a cricket game scheduled. Then they planned to walk around the city and stay overnight. Vicky, of course, wanted to cancel everything, but Emil insisted. He didn't want to let the team down or lose money on accommodation. But when they arrived at their destination after a long day, it turned out that it wasn't a hotel, but a shared room for all the team players, where they would sleep in sleeping bags with their partners. Vicky couldn't sleep in those conditions after a miscarriage and asked to go home. They had already attended the game. In response, Emil simply handed her the car keys, and she drove home alone for 2 hours, enduring the fatigue and pain because her husband preferred his cricket team members over her. Fortunately, they soon welcomed their daughter, and shortly after, Vicky found out she was expecting their second child. Her joy was only overshadowed by thoughts of finances. Both of them worked and earned well, but they didn't live extravagantly. Meanwhile, Emil had somehow managed to accumulate debts, which continued to grow. Emil's neglect became more and more apparent with each passing day. Vicky suspected that he might be unfaithful. One day they were out with friends, drinking, and their phones were lying on the table. Suddenly, one of the phones made a sound. It wasn't just any sound, but a notification from a well-known dating site, one you couldn't mistake. Their friends laughed and joked that someone had found a match, but it turned out that the person was Emil. All their friends found out that he was chatting with girls on the dating site while his wife was preparing to become a mother for the second time. Of course, the friends tried to smooth things over with jokes, but Vicky probably wished she could disappear into the ground. The most shocking thing was that from that moment, their relationship started to deteriorate, not because of Vicky, but because of Emil. His wife suddenly bored him. It got to the point where Emil told his wife that he would stay with her for a few months after the birth of their second child, and then he would need to reconsider their marriage. How could a man say such a thing to his pregnant wife? But the final straw for Vicky came when he paid for a dance lesson on Valentine's Day. Needless to say, he didn't invite his wife to the dance. Until then, Vicky had been able to overlook his actions, but this confirmed that he was actively dating other women. She understood that their marriage was over. But then one day he came home with a wide smile and announced that he had a surprise for her, a tandem skydive. On the scheduled day, Saturday, he behaved perfectly, just like before. He held her parachute and watched over the kids. The detectives didn't miss the opportunity to ask the woman if she remembered how Emil had briefly left with her parachute to go to the bathroom. She confirmed that their daughter needed to use the restroom, and he took her. But he was gone for only 2-3 minutes, not nearly long enough to do anything with the parachute. The woman insisted that her husband was incapable of harming her. It was one thing to cheat, but murder was a betrayal of an entirely different magnitude. However, when they asked her if anything else strange had happened around that time, she unknowingly made an incredible statement. Victoria recounted that about a week before her fall, there was a gas leak in their home. She was home with the children while Emil wasn't there, staying at the army barracks to get an early start on work. Upon waking up, Vicky smelled gas and discovered it was coming from the pipe connected to the stove in the kitchen. She noticed blood on the pipe. Emil had recently cut himself, and she had to wipe the blood off all the surfaces in the house. She texted her husband, asking if he had done anything to the pipe since it smelled like gas. He responded, saying it was strange, and asked, "Is the stove working?" Of course, Vicky wasn't planning to light the stove in a kitchen filled with gas. She decided her husband had asked the question without thinking and jokingly replied, "Are you trying to kill me?" A truly innocent person would have laughed it off and apologized for the hasty question, but Emil started making excuses. Forensic experts who inspected the stove confirmed that someone had loosened the bolt on the pipe. Moreover, the marks and scratches on the pipe indicated that this person didn't know what they were doing. Investigators felt it was crucial that the supposed victim of these crimes was on their side, so they decided to show her just how unfaithful her husband had been. They hoped this would help her see his behavior in a new light. First, they mentioned his romantic entanglements. The detectives informed Vicky that her husband had been seeing a mistress. He and Stephanie had exchanged over 32,000 messages. Emil had lied to Stephanie, claiming he would leave Vicky as soon as their second child was born. He said this was because only then could he get a DNA test that would prove the child wasn't his. In other words, he invented a story about an affair Vicky supposedly had. He also made a very compromising promise. From April, I'll be able to manage my time more flexibly. I'll do anything for you. He sent this message in January, meaning, according to the police, he had been planning to get rid of Vicky since then. And if his plan with the gas stove had worked, he likely would have gotten rid of his children too. But that wasn't all. He regularly used the services of sex workers and visited a swingers club, where he was even kicked out. What kind of person gets kicked out of a place where people are generally tolerant and understanding? However, the most devastating blow for Vicky was the news that her husband had also been seeing his ex-wife, Carly. 10 years after their divorce, they had rekindled their relationship behind Vicky's back. The women had been communicating and coordinating when Emil would spend time with the children. They almost had a friendship, or so Vicky thought. But even that wasn't everything. Emil owed not just a few £1,000s, as Vicky had thought, but more than 20,000. At first, he had managed to come up with reasonable explanations for asking his wife for money. But when she gave him access to her account, he freely spent the funds as he pleased. And his spending was large and often extravagant, such as purchasing a new aquarium, paying for dance lessons for two on Valentine's Day, which he didn't invite Vicky to, or a romantic all-inclusive weekend with Stephanie. Of course, Vicky wasn't a fool or blind, even though she had been blinded by love. She noticed her husband flirting with other women and his excessive spending, but he always had an explanation ready, often ridiculous. He claimed that someone had cloned his phone number to send messages to pretty, sometimes very young girls, and hackers had stolen money from his account. When the police opened Victoria's eyes to the full truth, she felt deceived, humiliated. But above all, she was disturbed by her husband's lies about their son. If he could lie about that, he could fabricate anything. Why lie about the child not being his and claiming he would do a DNA test to prove it? Victoria couldn't forgive that. She provided the detectives with crucial evidence that became a key piece in the case against her husband. She revealed that Emil had spent not 3 minutes, but 10 minutes in the bathroom with her parachute. Moreover, after the parachute jump was canceled that Saturday, Victoria planned to take the parachute to the drop zone, but her husband suggested she just leave it in her locker for the night, as she would return the next day. She listened to him. Investigators had already wondered why Emil would take the bulky parachute into the cramped bathroom with his daughter. But if Emil had gone in with the parachute, was it possible for him to take it out, tangle the cords, remove the 2 fastenings from the reserve chute, and repack it? They conducted an experiment, and it showed that 5 minutes was indeed enough to sabotage the parachute. At the end of 2017, Emil was charged with 2 attempted murders. The case against him largely consisted of circumstantial evidence. For instance, investigators discovered that a few days before Victoria's parachute incident, Emil had searched online for a wet nurse, as if he knew his wife wouldn't be able to breastfeed their 5-week-old son. However, there was no direct evidence linking him to the sabotage parachute or the gas pipe. Emil also took the witness stand. Trying to explain the gas leak, he claimed that there was construction work down the street from their house, and the vibrations caused the bolt to loosen by itself. He also suggested that the jury should consider the possibility that Victoria had sabotaged her own parachute because she wanted to die. To the prosecutor's horror, the testimony of the would-be victim cast doubt on Emil's guilt. Victoria admitted that when she was pregnant for the second time, suspecting her husband of infidelity and excessive spending, she had threatened to kill herself unless he straightened out and became a better husband. Victoria also said she had thought a lot about the incident and came to the conclusion that she had cut the main parachute, even though experts had confirmed that the cords had been tangled and that she had followed the instructions. Victoria further explained that she had exaggerated the time when she gave her second testimony to the police, and that Emil hadn't been in the bathroom for as long as she had initially stated. She claimed that she wanted to get back at him for the offense he had caused her. Emil's defense lawyers, in turn, argued that Victoria was more valuable to Emil alive than dead. Victoria confirmed this. She had removed her husband from the inheritance of her estate and house. She told them she had changed her will to ensure her children would be protected if anything happened to her, as she did not trust her husband financially. However, after his wife's death, Emil would have been entitled to a £120,000 insurance payout. This amount would allow him to pay off his debts and still have some left over. The jury had a hard time. They deliberated for 8 days and couldn't come to a unanimous decision. They were dismissed when 2 jurors became ill due to stress. It is unclear what exactly happened during their deliberations, but it can be assumed that it was very tense. The prosecution tried again to convict Emil in the spring of 2018. The new jury members were shown the messages Emil had sent to his mistress and ex-wife. Some were sent while he was in the hospital, sitting at the bedside of his wife, who had nearly died. Others were sent when she gave birth to his son just a few weeks before the incident. This time, the jury found him guilty on all charges. In the end, Emil Cilliers was undone by the lies he had crafted over all those years. Once those lies were revealed at once, he could no longer squirm, lie, or hide the truth. Unfortunately, Emil's influence on Vicky was too great, and after the trial, she stated that she had not come to terms with the verdict and did not plan to divorce her husband. 6 to 8 weeks after the trial, she regularly visited him and called him every day. Emil assured her that she was everything he had. This was probably the first time he told the truth. During the trial, not a single friend, family member, or colleague came to support him. But later, Vicky admitted that she had gone to visit her husband with a large notebook in which she had written down all the questions she wanted answers to. Of course, Emil did not confess to anything. Power over his wife meant everything to him, and his power lay in the answers he could give her. This was the only remaining way for him to manipulate Vicky. Investigators later said that this was a case where justice was done for the victim who did not want it. If the lead instructor of the base hadn't examined the parachute, and if her friend hadn't called to say that things weren't going well in her family, one of Emil's attempts to kill his wife could have ended in success. This is a unique story of a woman whose husband never stopped trying and failing to kill her. She survived 2 attempts on her life. Unfortunately, sometimes victims cannot set healthy boundaries for themselves. If a husband tries to kill his wife twice and that's not enough to kill the romance, it's toxic love. It's like a skydiver with a faulty parachute. It promises an exhilarating jump, but inevitably leads to a fatal fall. It took a long time before Vicky recognized her husband's control over her, but she did. She demanded a divorce. Emil refused to grant it for a long time, claiming that their marriage still had a future, but she got what she wanted. In 2019, Vicky published a book titled, "I Survived. I Married a Wonderful Man, then He Tried to Kill Me." As the final step to turn the page on this chapter of her life, Vicky jumped with a parachute for charity and donated the funds raised to the air ambulance and medical staff who saved her life. She did the tandem jump with a friend to feel the support of a reliable shoulder and friendly companionship. And on the field, her children were waiting for her. Today, Vicky still finds it difficult to fully trust another person, but she is happy. She is raising her children, and she even found love. Her chosen one was among the other skydivers who jumped with her that fateful day. It's wonderful that she was able to see the happiness that was always so close to her.